Destined for the saddle, for the spear, for the clash of shields, and for the thunder of war. He entered the army of the Eastern Empire while still a boy, his frame strong, his will unbroken. He was given command of a small band of men armed with spears and shields, and their loyalty was to him as much as it was to the empire. Belisarius forged them into a weapon as sharp as any sword, for he believed that discipline and trust were stronger than numbers. He drilled them till their arms ached and their voices grew hoarse, but when the day of battle came they moved as one, and the enemy felt the bite of their unity. The Emperor Justinian saw the spark in him and raised him higher than men of noble birth could ever dream. Justinian was a man of vision. He wished to restore the old Roman Empire, to reclaim its lost lands and its lost glory, and for this he needed a sword that would never break. Belisarius became that sword. His first great trial came against the Persians, the ancient foes of Rome, who pressed upon the eastern frontier like a relentless tide. The Sassanid Empire sent forth their warriors clad in armor shining beneath the sun, their numbers vast, their banners dark against the sky, and in the year of 530 they marched upon Dara. Belisarius with but a small host stood against them, his men outnumbered 2 to 1, his fate hanging upon a single day, yet his mind was a fortress stronger than any wall. He set his troops in cunning order, digging trenches and hiding cavalry upon the wings. He turned the plain into a snare while the Persians advanced proud and certain of victory. The clash came like thunder across the earth, spears broke, shields splintered, the cries of men and horses filled the wind, yet the Persians found themselves trapped, struck from the flanks by hidden riders, driven back by the discipline of Belisarius. His men fought as lions, and the field was red with the blood of those who had thought themselves masters. That day Dara became his crown of triumph, and the name Belisarius was carried across the empire as the bringer of victory. Yet triumph is always shadowed by trial, and soon came the fire of rebellion within the very heart of the empire. In the great city of Constantinople the Nika riots rose like a storm, the streets filled with tens of thousands crying out against Justinian. Flames consumed the houses, the mob declared another emperor, and the throne of Justinian trembled. Belisarius was called not to fight an enemy beyond the frontier, but to strike down his own people. With a heavy heart he entered the hippodrome with his soldiers, the rebels shouting like a sea of voices, yet he did not falter. Steel met flesh, cries of defiance turned to cries of despair, and when the dust cleared the hippodrome was filled with corpses. 30,000 lay dead, and the throne of Justinian stood unshaken. Belisarius had saved his emperor, but at a cost that haunted his soul, for victory over his own people tasted of ash. Then came the call of Africa, where the Vandals reigned as lords for a century, a kingdom carved from the ruins of Rome, a kingdom of pirates and raiders who struck terror upon the seas. Justinian commanded Belisarius to sail with but 15,000 men against a host twice their size. Many thought it madness, yet Belisarius did not fear the sea nor the odds. He sailed forth, his ships black upon the waves, and in the year 533 he set foot upon the African shore. The Vandals rushed to meet him, their king Gulimer proud in his armor, their horsemen swift across the dust. At Ad Decimum the two hosts clashed, the dust of Africa rising like smoke. Belisarius stood at the center, his voice steady, his sword flashing. He ordered his men with calm precision while chaos raged about him. When his flank faltered he was there, when the line bent he rode among them, restoring courage with his presence alone. The Vandals broke upon his discipline, and the field was his. Within days Carthage, the jewel of Africa, fell without resistance, the gates thrown open and the people rejoicing to see the banners of Rome once more. Yet Gulimer did not yield. He gathered his strength again and met Belisarius at Tricamarum, but again discipline triumphed over pride. The Vandals fell shattered, their kingdom ended, and Africa was restored to the empire. Belisarius returned to Constantinople in triumph, parading the Vandal king in chains, yet Belisarius himself rode humbly at the head of his men, not as a conqueror drunk with power but as a servant of Rome. But fate is never done with those it marks for greatness. Soon Italy called, where the Ostrogoths ruled in the shadow of the old Caesars. Justinian longed to reclaim the land where Rome was born, and Belisarius was once more sent forth with a small host against a mighty kingdom. He crossed into Sicily, and the island fell like a ripe fruit. Then he marched into Italy itself, the Goths gathering to resist him, yet city after city opened its gates. Naples fell after a fierce struggle, and then Rome itself, the eternal city, welcomed him back after decades of Gothic rule. The Goths enraged laid siege to Rome with a host that dwarfed the defenders. For a year the city stood surrounded by the enemy, their numbers pressing upon the walls like waves upon a cliff. Belisarius with but a fraction of their force held the city, his strategy cunning, his courage unyielding. He used fire ships against their bridges, he sallied forth in sudden strikes, he closed every breach and repelled every assault. Famine and plague struck, yet still he endured, and when the Goths could bear no more they withdrew in shame, leaving Belisarius master of Rome. But envy and fear were the companions of his triumph. Justinian, suspicious of his general's fame, withheld reinforcements and sent rival commanders to undercut his power. Belisarius endured it all with patience, his loyalty unbroken. Though others would have seized a crown, he fought not for himself but for his emperor and his people. He pressed on, captured Ravenna, the Gothic capital, and with it the Gothic king surrendered, offering even to make Belisarius emperor of the West. Yet Belisarius refused, choosing loyalty over ambition, his greatness shining brighter than any throne. Belisarius returned from Ravenna crowned in victory, yet his heart was heavy with the weight of suspicion, for though he had refused the Gothic crown and laid all Italy at the feet of his emperor, Justinian did not greet him as a hero but as a rival. Whispers filled the palace that Belisarius was too great, too beloved, too dangerous. The hand of envy lay upon his shoulders, though his loyalty had never faltered. He was recalled from Italy, stripped of command, for a time set aside as if he were no more than a tool to be used and cast aside. Yet when the Persians threatened again, the empire could not do without him, and Justinian called once more. Belisarius obeyed, as always the servant of duty. He rode eastward to meet the fire of Persia again. At Clinicum upon the Euphrates the Persian tide swept forward, fierce and unrelenting. Belisarius with weary troops held them back. Through courage alone, though pressed on every side, he fought with the same calm as at Dara, turning defeat into survival and bringing his men home. Though lesser commanders would have been destroyed, his name once more was praised, yet still mistrust stalked him like a shadow. Years passed and Italy once more fell into chaos, the Goths rising under new leaders, the work of Belisarius undone by neglect and folly. Justinian sent him again, yet now with fewer men, less gold, and no support, for the emperor feared his general's greatness more than he feared the enemy. Belisarius entered Italy once more, his armor worn, his hair touched with gray, but his spirit still unbroken. He fought with cunning and courage, but without supplies, without reinforcements, he could not finish what he had begun. He held Rome again against siege, he struck where he could, he saved what could be saved. Yet when at last he was recalled, it was not as a conqueror but as a scapegoat. The court whispered of his failures, though the true failure lay in the emperor who starved him of strength. Yet Belisarius never raised his hand against his lord. Though men urged him to seize the crown of the West, he bowed his head and obeyed, choosing loyalty over glory, choosing service over betrayal. In this his greatness was brighter than any triumph, for he proved that honor is greater than power. In the years that followed he lived in quietness, yet even in old age when the empire faced peril he was called once more. Though bent with years he mounted his horse and led men to victory again, his sword still sharp, his spirit still unyielding, and the enemies of Rome fled before the shadow of his name. But fate is cruel to the loyal, his enemies at court accused him of corruption. He was tried, disgraced, for a time his house stripped of honor, though soon restored. The stain remained. The tragedy of Belisarius was not that he was defeated in war but that he was betrayed in peace, his emperor mistrusting his most faithful servant. His reward for victories was suspicion, his crown of triumph turned to ashes. Legends tell that in his last days he was blind and forced to beg for alms upon the streets of Constantinople, crying, "Give an obol to Belisarius." Though historians dispute this tale, the story lived because it touched the hearts of all who heard it, for it was a symbol of how fortune can betray even the greatest of men, a warning that loyalty often finds no reward save in the memory of posterity. Yet whether he begged in darkness or simply faded in quiet, his legacy was carved upon the stones of Rome and upon the sands of Africa, upon the plains of Persia and upon the hearts of men. He was the shield of the empire, the sword of Justinian, the man who with small armies won great victories, who with loyalty endured betrayal, who with humility refused crowns and yet became greater than kings. Belisarius died in the year 565, his life closing as the reign of Justinian also ended. He was laid to rest not with the wealth of emperors but with the honor of soldiers, his name carried in whispers by the legions, his story told in awe by those who knew what greatness truly was. And so the saga of Belisarius is not only of battles won and cities taken, but of the spirit of a man who held to loyalty when all the world urged ambition, who endured envy with patience, who gave his strength not for himself but for Rome and for duty. He was not crowned in gold but in the love of his men and in the memory of all ages. For in the end greatness is not measured by thrones or by treasures but by the heart of one who serves when he could rule, by the faith of one who endures when he could betray. Belisarius, the general who could have been emperor, chose instead to be loyal. He became not just a warrior of Rome but its living legend. I need your unwavering support, and I want to feel your presence behind me like a pillar of strength, so PLZ, like and subscribe. Thank you.